we're approaching a press conference by Trump very soon. He said he rejects the latest Iranian offer. So the question, I actually raised this in the chat, and Jeffrey and some others already responded briefly, but I wanted to open and see what you thought of, is, as we're barreling towards restarting active military action, is it possibly working into the hands of the hardliners in Iran? Whereas if we were to just continue the blockade, perhaps they would implode even faster than if the kinetic action happens. They'll bomb, they'll demoralize the IRGC, they'll kill some IRGC in bases and whatever, but maybe it would be an easier job for the people to take over if the hardliners themselves have an internal power struggle that creates a collapse.
That's a very good question. If we were looking at only American interests, just continuing with the blockade. Okay, so let's do a perspective of this. Okay, some people are saying if we're only looking at only America's interests, not getting involved militarily would be great because the blockade is working beautifully, and it requires not risking American soldiers, and it's much more efficient, much less costly, and it's basically dividing the Islamic Republic and suffocating them. So why not just wait it out and see how that works out before you do some military operations, right? But on the other, and from that perspective, the forces that are bringing the United States back to military operations is the Arab countries around the Persian Gulf, especially UAE and Saudi Arabia, and also Israel, because they don't want to wait. They're like, "What the hell are you talking about? Wait, the Strait of Hormuz is not open. We want to go back into military operations to end all of this." And the Israelis are really seem to be very eager to go back to fighting because they were on a roll when it comes to taking people off that they had on their checklist, and they're eager to go back to that. But another perspective is that, and also another one perspective is that actually just keep one theory that says just keep with the blockade and don't mess with it, don't ruin something that is working, is that it's causing division, it's causing infighting. But if military operations might unite the pro-regime people again towards a goal. So because when the fighting was happening, the pro-regime people were like, "Yeah, fuck the Americans, Israelis, let's go to war. Yeah, we could do this, right?" And then when it stopped, now they're in the streets and they're fighting against each other, right? I just got a voice message from this woman inside Iran, and these street protests has now turned into a place where they are taking camping against each other with signs against each other, right? So they're saying that we're enjoying watching them. It's turning the streets of pro-regime people has turned into a battlefield against one camp against another camp. So this is beautiful. Like, why mess with that? If you go back to military operation, they will get now all of that energy will be back into, let's say, yeah, death to America, death to Israel, let's kill the enemies, right? And might become a unifying force. So that's one theory. But another theory is that the whole reason why we got here was because we killed so many of them that created a power vacuum, and the power and filling that power vacuum is what's causing the division. So taking the next layer out will make it even more chaotic,
Yeah, but
right?
don't you
Will
think
create
the next layer is more bunkered in? Vahidi is not walking around in the streets. He wouldn't hold a meeting the way that Khomeini held a meeting and with all the important people around him.
but still it's his dominance has is now been established, you know what I mean? So with, like, he's a military person, he doesn't need to come out and give speeches. The thing is that he has successfully become now the main guy, right?
Right, but
So he is a
that makes it harder to knock him off if he's in some bunker knowing that everyone's gunning for him.
i'm I'm sure Israelis could figure out how to take him out. I don't know, but I'm just saying if you take him out, that would cause a bigger power vacuum, right? They're like, okay, who's in charge of the IRGC now, right? Everybody's competing against each other. So that would be beneficial. And also, I would argue, so now I'm leaning towards, so everything I said so far was against military operation. Now everything I'm saying is going to be in favor of military operation, okay? Taking out Vahidi would be a huge win. It will cause more division. Okay, so yeah, maybe military operations will cause some unity among regime supporters, but that would be temporary because we could go back to the whole ceasefire anytime we want, right? So we could go back to that and stop the military operation again. So taking out Vahidi would be a huge win. Taking out Mushtaba Khamenei would be a huge win because it would be like ridiculous supreme leader for 2 months is so humiliating and embarrassing for the Islamic Republic. It would demoralize them. Taking out, so you're saying we're saying that the military blockade is the naval blockade is working because it's financially like destroying the Islamic Republic. Sure, but taking out some electric power plants will escalate that, right? So some people are saying, like, why not add to the economic suffocation of the Islamic Republic? Just because the blockade is working, we don't have to stop there, right? So those are the arguments for in favor of taking out some other the next layer of regime leaders. Increasing the economic pressure on the Islamic Republic will basically speed up the process. And also, another argument for adding military operations is that the United States cannot just stay there forever. They want to wrap this thing as fast as possible. So the military operations will speed things up. So that would be in favor of military operations, right? And also the fact that the Saudis and the Emiratis are important in US politics, right? Because they have trillions of dollars of investment apparently wanting to bring to United States. So you want to maintain that relationship. Israel's relationship with the United States is important. These are US allies. You can't just abandon them because you have other priorities, right?
Jeffrey wanted to respond to this.
Yeah, it's a very valid question. I would what is the I guess the way you would answer it or shake it out is what is the net sum value if you're going to do either or? It's not like it has to be either or. Let's say it is though. What is the net sum value when measuring between mass strike versus economic blockade? So mass strikes, particularly as it's envisioned, maximalist eliminates the entire regime, the IRGC and besieged leadership down to lieutenants. It destroys all of the IRGC and besieged headquarters down to even below provincial headquarters. It destroys the entire Mullah regime's conventional military, like ground force military, so no tanks, APCs, helicopters, self-propelled artillery and or short-range rockets. And it eliminates everything in the Strait of Hormuz. So that's one fell swoop. 5 days, $5 billion, the regime ceases to exist. Downside is, like Armin said, there might be a rally to the flag, although it's not exactly clear. It would definitely lead to some chaos. Now you have no positive control over the executionary element of the besieged in IRGC. Blockade, on the other hand, less expenditure in munitions and public consumption, potentially less in political cost, although even there it's like upfront political cost versus overall sustained political cost because there's a longer operation vis-a-vis, I don't know, 5 days of strikes, maybe not have the rally behind the flag. So I would contend you should do both, right? Do the mass strike, open up the strait, take down the Strait of Hormuz, all that stuff and all the conventional stuff, and maintain the blockade while adding a third line of effort, which is to have His Highness Prince Reza Pahlavi, after the strikes are done, reach out to those anti-mullah elements inside Iran. So anti-mullah Artesh, the Immortal Guard, Immortal is it the Immortal Guard? What do you call them? The Immortal Guard? Yeah, the Immortal Guard. Those guys to clear out all the remnants and try to stabilize the region. Either way, I'm very much pro mass strike to get it over and done with. Because the blockade, it'll work. The only thing is you have longer pain for everybody involved, not the least of which is Iranian citizens. And I think they've suffered enough.
So, in short, kaboom, boys. A sketch, you're next.
I think we're forgetting one of the main points. One of the main points was 440 kilos of uranium. That's why this started. Until we get that, we're not going away. That's one of the things on that negotiating table that they keep fighting over. Because I guarantee you, one of the points of the negotiations is okay, we have an agreement and we're going to go get that, and you're going to let us go get that. And that's one of the things that I bet you is on that plan, that nobody knows all the points that are on that plan, but I guarantee you one of the things that is on that plan is we are going to go get that uranium. You don't get to keep that. And if it takes us a week, you're going to let us. That's I get. And if they're not going to get, if they don't get it by hook, they'll get it by crook. We keep talking about maybe the economics and maybe the this and maybe the that. And it's difficult. I know it's difficult. We don't care if it's difficult. We have done difficult things throughout all the history of America. We don't care how difficult it's going to be. It's going to get done. So any plan that forgets that, it's not based on reality, because that was the whole point. Trump is not going to also have the political capital of going through all this, because all this war is about those 440 kilos. If he doesn't come back with that, he's a failure, not just to the Democrats, who are always going to call him a failure. He's going to be a Democrat to his base, because that's why we went. This has all been about America. They cannot have a nuclear weapon, but we're going to leave them with 440 pounds of uranium at 60%. We're not going to do that. So any plan that forgets that is not a realistic plan. You're not taking into account one of the keystones, one of the reasons we're there. So I think that has to come into, and I know I sound passionate, I'm sorry, but I was exploding. I got to say this. I'm like, I know it's hard, but we got to do it. We got to be realistic about that part. That's why we're here. And I guarantee you that's one of the points that keeps getting pushed in that negotiation. It's not just about can they enrich. It's about, you're going to let us go get that. You're going to let us go in that tunnel. You're going to go let us go get that. If we got to bring equipment, you're going to let us get it. You might help us. We might take your equipment to pull it out. And you're going to let us. I bet that's on the negotiating table. And we're going to
Well, what's
bomb
the best
until
way to
that gets
achieve
done.
that? It's easy to
Bomb
say that,
them.
but you can.
There's
bomb-
two ways. There's two ways. There's two ways. No matter what, there's two
Let's
ways.
not
Either through
interrupt each other,
negotiation or
okay?
bombing. Either we do an operation, we send a whole lot of carriers, we send a lot of airborne Marines, regular army, people like me, mechanics that go with the tanks. Either we send everybody we got to send and we get it one way, or we negotiate and bomb, which is the other way.
Very
So
nice,
can I
Sketch.
just scared? The point is that it seems the preferable way for so many people is to is obviously this would be a loss if we end all of this without getting the 60% enriched uranium out. That's obvious, okay? But the two things, the arguments are between the people who are saying that just hold the blockade until they are desperate enough to come to the negotiating table and cooperate with you to get the enriched uranium out, and the people who say bomb them, and or maybe even the most extreme version is to send the military in and get the enriched uranium out, right? So I know United States can do anything, but the question is at what price, right? At the price of putting American soldiers at risk in a very complicated military operations. So the people who are saying just keep putting pressure on them until they give in themselves, they say just a safer way of doing it. That's the Yeah, I know you could do it at that price, but if an option at a lower price is available for the same objective, so I'm not arguing
We're
for
on a
that, by the way.
timer.
I'm just
We're on a timer. We're not going to let them
right,
run the clock out and try to do the
right.
blockade thing until the 30 days run out. We have to do this now. We have to go get it now.
Okay, okay, all right, yeah.
I
Just
also
gonna
think
get that.
that the nuclear conversation could be code for the regime existing, because we all know they have an expansionist revolutionary ideology. If they exist, we know that they're going to build up again over the years. So to me, the nuclear conversation is kind of code for the regime existing itself. Anyway,
And
Sadato,
Nare,
you respond. Yeah.
no, before, because to your point, Nare, this latest post by President Trump seems to suggest exactly that. Hold on, why can't I share it? Why can't I share it? Here, let me actually try to share it. Okay, so
And they've always
can you
talked
share?
about it too. Marco Rubio has talked about it. Anytime they talk about the regime and their ideology, they're talking about a destructive, revolutionary, expansionist ideology. So they're very aware of that. So even if they leave them wounded but still alive, even half dead, who's to say they're still going to build up and continue over the years?
Yeah, so Nara, look at this post by President Trump saying, I will soon be reviewing the plan that Iran has just sent to us, but can't imagine that it would be acceptable. So when I got to this point, I thought he's going to say because they're not giving up their nuclear dust. But look at this. It went a completely different way. It's a but can't imagine that it would be acceptable, in that they have not yet paid a big enough price for what they have done to humanity and the world over the last 47 years. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. This to me suggests that there's nothing that they could offer that would mean that will satisfy President Trump, because one way or another, these people need to be punished.
Yeah, they
That's what
should
that
cease to
suggests to me.
exist. They should cease to exist. If they
Right.
don't want a nuclear, they don't want them to have a nuclear weapon, they should cease to exist. That's the solution. Sadato, you're to respond next.
Hi. So yesterday, apparently there was a swarm of speedboats that were crisscrossing the strait, and it seems like possibly they were laying more mines. It seems like this delay could be really bad for if we want to ever have that strait cleared in the future or the near future. It seems like the sooner we strike, the better, and potentially also possibly work on clearing the strait, focus on the Bandar Abbas region, possibly even like an amphibious landing, whatever it takes to clear that, because the economic pressure globally seems to be intensifying due to the oil restrictions. Any thoughts on that?
Wait, so what's the question again? Sorry.
It's not a question. I'm just responding to the fact that by delaying, we're allowing them to lay a bunch more mines in the strait.
Mines, yeah.
And also,
So one thing about the mines that people need to take into account is that you don't actually need to clear out the entire Strait of Hormuz from mines to be able to open it. You only need to have one route that you cleared to and guard from mines, and basically provide security for ships going through that one route. As long as you as long as you make sure that one is available and ships could go through that, then the rest of the strait could have mines in them, and it's fine because nobody's going over there. Does that make sense?
yeah, it just seems like the economic pressure. I heard an airline just stopped operating due to the oil shortages, and so I don't
Right.
know. It just seems like the global
So,
pressure. There'd be a lot less pressure if they could clear that, and then we could take our own sweet time getting rid of the nukes or whatever, or the enriched uranium, and eliminating the regime. But we could do it without so much international pressure. If people aren't feeling the pain, then we can keep going until it's done.
so when you say the people, are you talking globally or the U.S.? Because the U.S. the economy is doing really good.
No, globally, and recently had a yen crash, apparently possibly linked to
Yeah.
this situation. So I don't know. It just seems there'd be a lot less pressure on the U.S. or Trump or even internally if that situation could be mitigated somehow, even a little bit, and limit, because the reserves will run out, right?
Yeah.
Eventually. So I feel like the strikes need to happen sooner.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point, because one of the reasons why United States is likely to start military operations very soon is not just what's best for the US, is because of a lot of its allies are basically pressuring the United States to get it done with already and open the Strait of Hormuz, and that pressure is significant. So yeah, that's one of the main reasons why military operations might start soon. Does that even answer your question though? I don't know if I
Thank
addressed
you.
it at all.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Danny, you're to respond next, and then after that we have Sherry, and then I'm closing the responses for this current topic after the two
Okay.
people.
No, was
Danny.
it you who mentioned that that getting the uranium is somewhat code for regime change? So I'll go back months ago. So Witkoff actually, they asked Witkoff, what would you do to get the uranium back? And he said, we'll buy it off of them in repairs, basically in compensation to repair the state, but only if it's a government that's willing to do that. In other words, if a government's saying, well, if there's a friendly government that's willing to say, we're not interested in nuclearization, so the US will pay for some sort of a rebuilding fund in exchange for the uranium, which any somewhat normal government would probably gladly do. But and
Yeah,
only
and that
only the
government cannot be
craziest one.
called
Yeah,
and that government can be called the Islamic Republic, because then it wouldn't be the Islamic Republic if they don't fulfill their ambitions.
yeah.
If they get rid of that ambition of destroying Israel and the West and the Western civilization, then they wouldn't be the Islamic Republic.
Exactly.
Okay, Sherry, you're next to respond, and then we're moving on to a new topic.
I just had a quick response to Sedano. The airline that shut down is called Spirit, and they've been bankrupt. They've claimed bankruptcy a couple of times. They're just a failing. I'm actually a member of them. I fly for cheap, have all kinds of miles. It's fantastic. But the Iranian, whatever's going on, is just an excuse. They're already in bankruptcy at least twice before, so don't let that get you excited about the price of fuel. It's just
Well,
they
Sherry, I think that. Oh, sorry, I thought you. The price of fuel must have an effect. If you were already dealing with bankruptcy, I'm pretty sure that the fuel prices going up will then push you over the edge completely. No,
Oh,
it does have an effect.
I don't disagree with that. I'm
Right.
just putting in a little more context to what's been
Right.
going on with the airline Spirit. For instance, I'm trying to plan a flight in June, and when I go in to try, and for the last 3 weeks, I've been trying to go in there and schedule a flight. I've always had a direct flight from Atlanta into Baltimore, and it won't let me go beyond May. And so I have to go in and
Okay.
maneuver all that neat stuff to try and get it. And instead of a direct
Right.
flight, they've got a stop, but that doesn't tell you where the stop is. But now instead
All
of
right.
it being an hour and 40 minutes, it's 5 hours. I'm just putting some context.